Travel isn't always pretty. It isn't always comfortable. Sometimes it hurts. It even breaks your heart. But that's okay. The journey changes you. It should change you. It leaves marks on your memory, on your consciousness, on your heart, and on your body. You take something with you. Hopefully, you leave something good behind. With these words from Anthony Bourdain, I would like to welcome you to Live Oak. My name is John Fennessy, and I will be your worship associate today, assisting Reverend Jonathan Young with our service this morning, Meeting the Wizard. Let's pause, settle, and breathe as we move into our time of worship. In Unitarian Universalist congregations around the world, the symbol of the lighted flame in a chalice unites members in worship and symbolizes our faith in action. It represents the warmth of community and the flame of hope. The flaming chalice, like our faith, stands open to receive new truths that pass the test of reason, justice, and compassion. If you are joining us on Zoom and have your own chalice, please light your flame as I light our communal flame that represents our connection to one another.
Welcome to this house of memory and celebration. For our call to worship, I would like to share a favorite reading by Ralph Waldo Emerson. It's called The Oversoul. Let us learn the revelation of all nature and thought, that the highest dwells within us, that the sources of nature are in our own minds. As there is no screen or ceiling between our heads and the infinite heavens, so there is no bar or wall in the soul where we, the effect, cease and the cause begins. I am constrained every moment to acknowledge a higher origin for events than the will I call mine. There is a deep power in which we exist and whose beatitude is accessible to us. Every moment when the individual feels invaded by it is memorable. It comes as the lowly and simple. It comes to whoever will put off what is foreign and proud. It comes as insight. It comes as serenity and grandeur. The soul's health consists in the fullness of its reception. Forever and ever, the influx of this better and more universal self is new and unsearchable. Within us is the soul of the whole, the wise silence, the universal beauty to which every part and particle is equally related, the eternal one. When it breaks through our intellect, it is genius. When it breathes through our will, it is virtue. When it flows through our affections, it is love. We're going to talk about a wizard today. This is the great road trip story of American civilization, and it's a big story, so I'm taking three parts. About a year ago, did the first part up to Munchkin City and Glinda saying, follow that yellow brick road. Do not depart from that yellow brick road. We'll pick it up right there. But first, I have a joke that I got from Larry. Larry and I, midweek, conspire. He comes by, we trade jokes. So this is about the two impoverished magicians, appropriate for wizardry, right? Two impoverished magicians who go into the bakery, and the first magician, whose name is Abracadabra, tells his friend, Hocus Pocus, that he is going to show him the art of misdirection. They don't have any money, but they're both hungry. Anyway, Abracadabra steps up and says, Mr. Baker, what's that over in the shelf there? And the baker turns and says, oh, those are jelly donuts. Meanwhile, Abracadabra slips a roll into his pocket. And he says, and over on these shelves here, oh yes, those are croissants. And as he looks over, another bun disappears into the pocket of abracadabra. And what's cooking in the oven? The baker turns around and says, oh, that's whole wheat bread. And a third bun disappears into the pocket of abracadabra. Hocus Pocus whispers to him, I can do better than that. Now watch a master. Mr. Baker, would you step over here, please? You see these rolls on the counter? Yes, I do. Those are my fresh cooked rolls there. And instantly, Hocus Pocus gobbles up several of the rolls. And the baker is frowning at him. He says, I failed to see the magic. Ah, the magic. Sir, would you please check my friend's pocket? Thank you, Larry. We're on a yellow brick road. What happens on a journey? Well, you might meet people. You're on an airplane, you're in a terminal, you're waiting for something, or you're delayed, or on a rainy corner hiding from getting some shelter together. You meet people. Dorothy, following her mentor's guidance, following that yellow brick road, comes to a branch. Well, what to do? Well, strictly speaking, actually, we know this from the book, those branches reconnect at some point, so it wouldn't matter. But she has a decision to make. Sometimes you reach out for help when you're trying to make a decision. And she's pondering, which way shall I go? And the scarecrow says, well, you go that way, and he has some advice. He has a problem, too. He doesn't feel like he's very smart, a problem we all feel from time to time. Now, the Unitarian Universalist movement is the most highly educated group of all the denominations in the country. Doesn't mean we don't feel dumb sometimes. You can be very, very educated and just think, I can't figure this out. And sometimes you ask a friend, well, now she has somebody to talk to. A little surprising that he can talk, but here goes nothing. And they try to make this decision. They figure out which way to go, and he decides to come along. She explains she's off to see the wizard, and maybe he can help her get what she needs, which is to get back home. And he thinks, well, maybe he could help me get a brain. Now, some of us go off to university for that and spend a lot of time there, and it doesn't work. But you get very fancy diplomas. Those are very nice to put on the wall. Anyway, we're going along and come across another lost soul. Well, it looks like a statue at first, or a machine. It's made out of tin. It's a woodman. He has accidentally cut himself many times and turned himself into a robot-looking thing. And he has a problem too. Doesn't seem to have a heart, or doesn't think he has one. He's actually all rusted up, and they have a hard time getting him to talk, because the first sound comes out as, he wants oil, but he can barely get the sound out until they find a tin can of oil, and they oil him up, and he's going to join our tribe too. You know the story. So now we're three, and we go along and get a little more into the forest, meet a terrible beast, a lion, terrifying, growling lion. Well, I told that lion joke last time I was out there. I should have saved it for this one. Well, those of you who weren't here. This is the fellow who is unemployed. He's an actor, but he can't get work. Can you imagine that? I feel like acting and unable to get work. Anyway, he hears there's a job at the zoo. You see, the lion is sick off at the vet's, and he has to wear this lion suit. I know most of you have heard this. I do love this joke, though. And he's out, he said, well, can I do this? And I've completely screwed up the joke because I told it bad. That is not the joke. And you now see a joke teller in the depths of embarrassment, because it's actually a gorilla. He gets this job as a gorilla. And the end of the thing is, he's out there being a gorilla until somebody lets the lion in, and he's terrified until the guy in the lion suit says, shut up, we're both going to lose our jobs here. Okay, there's a very scrambled joke, and if you're able to do joke editing, you could piece that together. Back to our story. We're going along and going into a deeper forest, and that's what happens in our journeys, is it's bad and then it gets worse. And it's summertime, and some of you are planning holiday travel, and it seems like such a good time, but you've done this before, and it seems like it's been a while since the last time you did it, so you don't remember how awful travel is, how everything goes wrong. And that's when you're going to get the flat tire. That's when the airplanes are going to go on strike or something, just for you, because you're special and these things happen. And then later we tell the story, and of course the part we tell is not the boring part, not getting drenched in the rain, not the connection that didn't happen, but mostly the wonderful sunset we saw and the amazing people we met. We edit out and tell the condensed good version. Then other people get the false impression that your travels go well. It's only that they have catastrophes when they travel. So we go deeper into the forest. This is a story about spiritual seeking. L. Frank Baum grew up a Methodist, but rebelled against organized religion. People do that. And got very interested in other teachings, theosophy specifically. His mother-in-law was a leading suffragette and quite a prominent person in the then quite popular theosophy movement. This is an esoteric teaching, channeled writings and spooky stuff, but some ideas about the quest being the journey toward radiance, enlightenment, fulfillment, realization, whatever fancy language you want. This is the long journey of integrating the many levels of human experience into the amazing wholeness that is a human being. So that's why these journey stories, and they had a big thing about the golden road to enlightenment. So the yellow bricks are probably something from theosophy teachings. But what happens in this journey, Joseph Campbell wrote about it, the initiatory quest, okay, is it gets darker and darker and darker. You go off and, it's hopeful, and you go, we're going to get what we need, I'm going to have some adventures, and then you find yourself in a very spooky forest. This is not a mistake. It's not like someone did something wrong, and it's not like somebody gave you bad instructions. This is the heart of the matter. We need to go into the part of ourselves we have not yet fully explored, into the unknown. That's not the comfortable part. That's why we didn't explore it sooner. And so we go into the dark forest. And things happen there. I have some notes. I should look at them once in a while. What do they say? Oh, it says that the lion, who is very scary, is actually afraid of his own shadow. He's bluffing. He's the part of us that puts on a good show. Says, I got it together. And other people are convinced. We don't usually convince ourselves, but maybe that was the point, to try to convince ourselves that we're as confident as the roaring lion. But once challenged, he becomes terrified. That's the thing. When somebody is bluffing and is very impressive and acting very, very smart, very, very in control and powerful, it's usually whatever is the opposite of that. So if you meet somebody who is incredibly impressive, ask yourself, what else is going on in there? Probably not what I'm seeing. And we do it too, but okay. So we have 4 travelers now, and this is a highly symbolic story. So these are the familiar characters. The scarecrow, well, he's got to do with a field of corn. He's connected to agriculture, the life cycle of plants growing, and the animals eat the plants, and we eat the plants, and we eat the animals. This is life. It's all coming from the sun. That's why we have sun worship. So he's a direct connection to the agricultural traditions. And we have a Tin Man. Well, that's a machine. That's perhaps our life as workers, as able to do our labor and make money and make things and provide services and do what has to be done. And a big part of our life goes into that. And if we don't watch out, we will find ourselves treating ourselves like robots, like machines. That's not good. We're actually closer to the lion. We're animals. We think of the animals and we visit them. I live with cats, so they say dogs have owners, cats have staff. So I live in a home that's very much controlled by, managed by, directed by 2 very large male cats who were fighting with each other this morning. And I intervened with a large shout, which is not very gracious, but it tends to stop the immediate combat. One of them darted off, and end of that. Okay. But I'm a cat. I mean, I'm a cool cat. But anyway, I'm a body. We're all bodies. We're in the tension because we have humanity. We have this intelligence. We have the ability to speak and reason and do science. And we need to be fed. We need to get some rest. We're creatures. We need our exercise. So the lion perhaps is this. Toto also. And then we have Dorothy. Dorothy, I would say, is the primary seeker. She's the one that needs something. She's motivated. She has desire. In a story, you need to know what the longing is. That's what will pull the story forward. She wants to go home. Well, in the last episode, we actually were at home briefly. Uncle Henry and Aunt Em were running a chicken ranch, and it really wasn't very cozy for Dorothy. She didn't get much attention. She didn't have any playmates. She was kind of bored. And that's how this story started. And yet she wants to go back there. Well, then I think we're not exactly talking about home, that place. We're talking about home as an idea. Home as in back home to ourselves, to feeling like we have a sense of belonging and place, to feeling like somebody cares about us, that we are connected. Yes, we need to get to that place, and we lose track of it, and we have to find our way back, and sometimes there's a Glinda to give us some hints, and sometimes there are traveling companions that are looking for something on their own. Will the Scarecrow get a brain? Will the Tin Man get a heart? Will the Lion get the courage that he thinks he's lacking? Well, yeah, because we saw the movie last year, but we don't know that yet if we just take this as a fresh story, and we don't know if we will find our way back home. Dorothy unites the group. She maybe represents meaning. She has the moral intention. She is the seeker that will pull it all together if anybody can. But there's a lot of dark forest. The light diminishes. Certainty disappears. This is the unknown. This is uncertainty. This is anxiety. This is the place beyond our easy control. Mythology constantly was sending travelers into forests, into the stormy seas, into the dark night of the soul. It is necessary to go there. And when we find ourselves there, we might say, what did I do wrong? A tendency to blame ourselves comes up very quickly. Or somebody's got it in for me. Somebody set me up here. Blame comes rather quickly. But this is just the ordinary discomfort of life. This isn't somebody doing something wrong. This just comes with the deal. In fact, this is the good part of the deal. This is the part where we will discover things we had set aside or hadn't quite gotten to. Remember Dante and the long journey into a very dark place, and it's a comedy? Well, it's a joke. It's a rude joke on us, and yet we somehow come out of it wiser than we started. Buddha entered the wilderness. Jesus went out to the desert. This keeps going. This time it's a forest. The symbolism is the same. We need to get beyond control, beyond certainty, beyond what we know. And it's more comfortable to be inside what we know. So this is the cloud of unknowing that the medieval mystics talked about. But it's a vulnerable place. There are no guarantees here. The forest might gobble us up. It asks us to trust a process that we cannot understand, and yet plow ahead. Trust ourselves, trust our own life stories, that it somehow has led to this, and then have enough general optimism to think, well, I'll get something out of this. That we try to rush that. We like to say, what am I going to get out of this early? We'll find that out after the fact. It's not much comfort yet. It's just that we have to maybe review our own history and say, okay, the other times that I've gotten really confused and lost, I am the wiser for it. I did get something good out of that. This one, I don't know. And then something else. Flowers. That's got to be good, right? Flowers. I got a little flower shirt on here. Flowers are good news. Poppies, pretty poppy fields. Sometimes you travel up to, what is that place? The Antelope Valley has these amazing fields of poppies. Ann and I went up there one time when they were in bloom, and they just go on and on and on. But this is not actually good news. It's a bit of a temptation. The wicked witch, who is lurking behind all these stories, has in fact got it in for us this time. She snuck in some gas that will put us to sleep and kill us. You know, she wants those red shoes that Dorothy is wearing. Can't get them off her while she's alive, part of the rules of the story. So there is somebody out to get us, but I'd rather read it psychologically, that our own insecurity, our own tendency to shoot ourselves in the foot is always around someplace. To defeat this journey of discovery. And what do Dorothy and the lion do? They decide it's a good time to take a nap. Well, naps are good things, and as we get older, we need more of them, but there's a time and a place. we have a calling, there's a mission, there's something going on in this story that we're supposed to be doing. At the moment, we're supposed to be finding the wizard, finding our way to the Emerald City. We're not supposed to be napping now. But that's what Dorothy does. And now the Scarecrow is a scarecrow. He does not sleep. So he's awake. And the Tin Man is a machine. He does not sleep. So he's awake. So these two conspire to try to call for help. And Dorothy gets some help from her mentor, Glinda. Glinda, who set this story in motion, shows up. It is the only time in this perilous trek that and she does help us out. Now, it is worth noting, before she saves our bacon here, that Glinda only shows up one time. We're in peril many times in this long adventure, and she helps us once. Why doesn't she give us a break? Show up a little more often? For a very good reason. If the wiser figure steps in every time we're confused or scared, we won't learn a thing. We won't develop our muscles. We won't work out the systems we need for the longer story. We've got to bumble around and figure most of it out for ourselves. But she is there. She is watching, and she does step in this one time. She brings snow, and somehow snow cancels out the effect of the poisonous gas. Well, the poisonous gas is kind of sinister and snow is kind of pure. Snow is essentially water. So is it a ritual of purification, like a baptism of some kind? We can go there. At any rate, we're back on our adventure. Thank you, Glinda. She exits the scene, and we press on, finally get ourselves to the Emerald City. We've seen it from a distance for all this long story. Now we're getting closer. And it is truly impressive. And there are some sketches there were some illustrations in the original 1900 book, and then the set directors at MGM really got carried away, kind of a modern look to the thing. It's green and it shimmers like a giant 1930s cathedral. Is L. Frank Baum picking on religion? Sure. He's a seeker. He's a spiritual adventurer and trying new ideas, and has some problems with authority and with received religion, and he's sending it up a little bit in this story. We get there and are not exactly invited. It's difficult to get in the city, and when we get in there, they make fun of us. We're sort of rubes from the country. And actually, if you take a look at us, this is not a very visually impressive crowd. And they wear very well dressed in the fancy city, and they wear sunglasses, and they're cool, and we're country bumpkins. They send us off to get spruced up at the clean and brush up factory. It's sort of a mechanical valet service. It's a comic moment in the story. Unless you think of it in ritual terms, if you were to enter a temple in the Greek tradition, you would bathe first, you would put on special robes for the occasion, you'd clean up before going toward the holy. That was part of the ceremony, and you did it to be as open as possible, and you did it out of respect and some fear. You want to be very respectful of mystery if you don't understand it. So, okay, we sing a little song about being cleaned up. It's called the Oblations, and then approach our real destination, the hall of the wizard, a very impressive palace or castle. Get to the door, and the buzzer doesn't work. We've got to knock, and then finally a head sort of pops out and tells us to go away. Well, we've come a long ways. This isn't very encouraging. It happens in travel. You had your whole plan centered around going to a certain museum, and you get there just to discover that there's repairs going on, or it's closed that day or something. It's getting a little better when we have more gadgets. It used to happen all the time in the day. It's closed on Tuesdays. Oh yeah, it's always been closed on Tuesdays. It said nothing on the brochure about being closed on, oh yeah, it's always been closed on Tuesdays. But I'm only here on Tuesday. It's closed, dude. Go back to America. More than once. I could tell you which museums, and then eventually you save your money and you go back and you finally see it, and it is wonderful, and that's part of what happens. So go away. What? We can't go, and it's actually the lion who kind of gets all sad about Dorothy coming so far, not for himself, but for somebody else. Sometimes we can find our assertiveness, our boldness, helping a friend, helping a child, helping a neighbor that we wouldn't do for ourselves. We will go over and above. But the lion who thinks he's a wuss is actually the one who pulls it off for us. And that's one thing about all three of these. The Scarecrow is throughout the journey showing us he's very clever. He's always solving problems. The Tin Man is the most empathetic of the group. He cares for everybody. He cries often, which is how he got rusted. The lion's a lion. Of course he's strong. We are the last to know. And the thing you think you need more of, you probably already have. But then why do I feel I know more? How about a really very intelligent person feels like they don't know enough? Einstein said, as the expanse of what you know grows, your encounter, the boundary with what you do not know is expanding. So you don't feel smarter and smarter and smarter. You know more and more and more. You're also profoundly aware of how much you don't know, because you can glimpse it from there. Whatever you think is missing or in short supply, you probably already have. You at least have enough of it to know it's important and to want it. So we finally get in, and it's a very impressive place. This is quite a palace. And the point of being impressive is very significant in show business. You know, abracadabra, and in leadership. The leader's always acting like it's got a more complete plan than really exists. And the whole thing is really designed to put you in awe, and it works. We're sort of, oh, this is big. I'm little. In fact, cathedrals were built to be very, very, very high so that you felt humble. Just the space itself would affect you as you walked in, and that was for a spiritual purpose. This is for political control. He's just trying to pull off being, and the one thing that the doorman said before we got in is that you can't see the wizard. Nobody sees the wizard. And the line just kind of goes by because it doesn't make sense. But you're in charge. How can you be in charge when nobody sees you? Actually, it works better if nobody sees you. Then nobody can see your flaws. And this is the psychology of the hermit, who doesn't go out much because of their insecurities. Well, nobody, I'm a little tired. I don't think I want to go, or I don't really know anybody there. There's all kinds of reasons. The real reason is I'm insecure. I don't know if I can handle being with people today. And that's the day you really need to go, because you'll find out, people like you, okay. At least they don't criticize you. In general, we're in California, people are pretty cheerful. I saw a New Yorker cartoon one time. It had New York versus California. And in the California, the little caption was, "Have a nice day." And then in the thought balloon, it said, "Go to hell." And in New Yorker, the caption was, "Go to hell." And the caption was, "Have a nice day." I've always found Manhattan to be an incredibly friendly place. I'm looking at my map or my phone, and somebody will come over and say, "Can I help you?" And I'm thinking, this is where people are supposed to be. It happens. People in shops and things are often in a big hurry. So there is a grumpiness to the thing. But there's also a lot of human kindness. Where was I? Oh, I was at the Wizard's Palace. And so we enter the great chamber of the wizard. And I am Oz, the great and powerful. And it is very impressive. There's this big sort of face up there kind of growling, and there's fire and smoke and lights and things. You know, when we were going down the yellow brick road, we were singing, "We're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz, because of the wonderful things he does." You just sang it. We're on the yellow brick road. We have not actually seen the wizard. We haven't seen him do any wonderful things, but we're already singing about it. That's called psychological projection. These are, or in ordinary parlance, expectation. We think something is going to happen. We think the wizard is something, and he counts on that. And he's putting on a kind of light show here. Actually, he does that little trick through a sort of projective device. He's got an ordinary size head, but he can blow it up and project it up on the curtains like that. So we're in our psychological projections watching a trickster put his head up in giant size through a projection device. Oh, and we're also watching a movie while this is happening. We have layer upon layer upon layer of projection. Part of the journey, the larger journey that this represents, is sorting out our projections, our expectations, our hero complex, our hero worship, all that stuff, where we imagine things about other people. And some of them fall hard and feel very betrayed. Well, when I met her, she seemed so nice, and then she was really very grouchy, and it just broke my heart. Well, she's probably a human being. She probably is nice part of the time, grouchy part of the time. Like, what exactly were you expecting, Snow White? I mean, where does that come from? Did it really come from this person that you're all mad at now? That crash is hard, and it really wasn't a conspiracy. Well, this one is, but usually people aren't lying to you. They're maybe putting their best foot forward or something. But no, they're just human beings with complexity, which we discover over time. And then there are some people, not in this room, but there are some people who will write people off. They'll just cross them off their list. Very disappointing friend. I thought that was a good person, but no. That doesn't make any sense, because they're crossing off perfectly good people. They just expected them to be perfect. They expected them to be far more than any human can be, and they end up very alone with long lists of people they won't talk to anymore. And it's very weird to be their friend, because you text them or something and they fried you or something, whatever you do in the tech where you realize that's not even reaching them anymore. They've cut you off. So this is about as far as we're going to go with the story today. Then we have one more installment in a year. We'll actually see if we ever get home. Because I have so much to say about the story, I had to take it in 3 bites. What have we learned from the wizard? Well, not too much yet. He has another adventure he wants to go on. There's another thing you will discover in life in general and travel specifically. When you think you've accomplished it, there's a whole extra task, at least one. You might remember in academics, when you think you're just about in sight of your, oh no, there's one more prerequisite, there's one more requirement. Was that in the catalog the whole time? Did they revise it? No, that was on the list the whole time. You must have missed it when you were reviewing it. That's the story. There's always a little more. Probably just as well, we did not entirely know how much would be asked of us when we started out. We might not have started. So we played this little mental shuffle with ourselves. So we have an additional journey, which gives me something to talk about next year. All right. The road continues. Dorothy keeps believing. The stars appear above the road. The companions walk onward. The mystery remains. The heart opens. The mind awakens. The spirit strengthens. The road beneath our feet becomes the road within our souls. The companions beside us become the reclaimed strengths within us. The distant city fades. The deeper home appears. The road continues. And so do we. I have some action steps. Befriend your inner scarecrow. List 5 strengths you routinely overlook. Practice recognizing existing wisdom rather than always searching for external validation. 2, oil the Tin Woodsman. Express feelings when you can. Identify longing, something you long for, a desire, often, every day in your meditation time. The 3rd is walk with the lion. Take one small action that fear has delayed. Let courage emerge slowly through action. 4, build a yellow brick community. Strengthen relationships that support compassion and psychological growth. Find some fellow seekers. It's good to have company on the road. They're in this room. And finally, turn personal healing towards social healing. Support causes that advance inclusion, dignity, environmental stewardship, social justice. Let inner transformation become community transformation. Namaste. Blessed be. And so it goes.